And so he's in Simon the leper's house, and as he's reclining at the table, right, so you can see him reclining, and you know the way you would sit, you'd have a feast together. And by the way, when we look into the fuller picture of the synoptic gospels, we see that there's a dinner being had. And so, you know, there would be these couches, and you would kind of sit down on the floor, and everybody's eating together, they're having a meal, and they're hanging out, and this woman comes in and is going to disrupt the party. And she is going to create a scene that will never be forgotten. She's going to come in and she is going to take a very expensive bottle of ointment. It's called pure nard. Nard extracted from a plant in northern India. And the value of it went up even more because of the distance that it had to travel from India to the location that they were in. And so you can imagine, it was perhaps a family heirloom. We don't know how she got it, but it would be in a flask with a neck, and the neck could be broken, but it didn't have to be broken. But it seems as if in her mind, she deemed Jesus as worthy of every ounce of pure nard. And so why bother leaving the lid off? I'll just break the neck of it and I'll offer it all to him, because she treasures him. She treasures Jesus that much that she'll pour it all out. And what a statement we would have. And so what do we see here? It says, it was very costly, verse 3, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. I mean, can you just envision that? Like Jesus is sitting there, maybe he's, working on some olives, and eating a couple olives, and as he's there maybe baptizing olives in oil, and he's just sitting there having a conversation, and in comes this woman with this incredibly expensive bottle. And to help you understand, as we're going to see in the context in a little bit, this is deemed to be worth 300 denarii, which would be basically a year's worth of work minus Sabbath days. So you can imagine an annual income, a year's salary put in a bottle that could be measured in ounces. And she so values and treasures Jesus that she's going to give up her most expensive item because she realizes that he's worth more than any item that she could ever possess, that he is the greatest possession that she has access to. And she breaks the alabaster flask and begins to pour it on his head. And you've got to imagine the faces on people around them. In some ways, you think that they would stand in awe and go, wow, this is amazing. Look what you're doing. But that's not what happens. Why? Because great acts of spiritual passion are met by the religious with disdain. Religious people don't want you treasuring Jesus too much. They don't want you getting too excited about him, too worked up about him. That will make a religious person uncomfortable. Religious people want to tame extravagant expressions to Jesus. Religious people want to keep things comfortable. Religious people want to keep things in a box. Religious people don't mind, you can lift your hand maybe partial, but don't get it up in the air here, right? And certainly don't go double on me here. That's too much. We're getting too excited here. You can offer a quiet amen, but God forbid, do not go Denise on us, okay? Mama Denise in the back, right? But yeah, there we go. And so, Mama Denise is Image Church's Mary, okay? We got our Mary. She's back there. She's been breaking that alabaster week after week, right, unto Jesus. And so let's check out their warm response to Mary's action. Well, there were some, verse 4, who said to themselves indignantly, why was the ointment wasted like that? Oh, that's one of those moments, like, I'm like, golly, I kind of struggle with like impulse control at times. I'm ADD. Plus I, took a gun to my head basically and just fired it at my prefrontal cortex with drugs when I was a teenager. So it kind of messes up my impulse control these days. And so that means I say things at times and I'm like, oh my goodness, why in the world did I say that, right? Like, can you imagine on reflection that statement? Why did she waste ointment like that? In other words, you talk about a real lack of discernment in that moment. That was no waste. You're talking about pouring out this ointment on God in the flesh. This is like, there's no one more valuable, no one to be esteemed higher. And what do they say? What a waste. I mean, my goodness, how in the world? But it's easy when we get the full story to kind of sit and think, yeah, you jokers, what were you thinking? But you gotta wonder, like, are there situations where you could be in where you think, maybe I would think the same thing, right? Like, somebody that they've saved their whole life and then all of a sudden they just feel so stirred to just go out on the limb and just give everything they have to Jesus. And you could just see how you might think, that you're really acting stupid like that. That's really foolish of you. Like, what are you doing here, right? Like, it's not worth it. Like you need to be careful here. You could see how maybe they thought that. Why was the ointment wasted like that? Like what? Like poured out on the Son of God? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii. And look, watch, here's how they spiritualize it. And given to the poor. Right? Like a religious person always knows how to spiritualize something, right? Like that money could have been given to the poor, right? And you know what's joker's involved in this, right? It's Judas. When you go over to the Gospel of John, in fact, why don't you turn over there? Let's just go see this joker because he's speaking, I think, for the disciples. Now, I think the disciples have some disdain, but I think that they would be like, oh yeah, Mary, that was a great act right there. I didn't understand what you were doing. I just thought you were being, extravagant for extravagant's sake. But my goodness, yeah, I understand, Mary, what you're doing. But Judas, no. Look at Judas. We see in chapter 12, and let's check out verse 4. All right? Or look at the last part of verse 3. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. You gotta love that, right? It was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? So there you go. Judas was the spokesperson in Gospel of Mark. He said this not because he cared about the poor, right? He's spiritualizing it. But because he was a thief and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. So there you go. Judas treasured treasure more than treasuring Jesus. And Mary treasures Jesus. Now, just to think about like perfumes and the costs, I mean, they can add up. I did some research online just out of curiosity because I'm thinking, man, this is a lot of money right here, right? But, this is not like Brute or Old Spice, right? This is better than that. It's not even like Drakkar, right? But check this out, like Chanel number 5, right? Is $1,850, right, for a bottle, right? That's pretty pricey right there. Can you imagine? $1,850. Golden Delicious. Now, this is where I'm going to be like, I'm really going to show how stupid I am, but it's DKNY, or is it like, is that what you say? Okay, thank you. Well, if you want a bottle of Golden Delicious perfume, you can have it. It's yours for $1 million, okay? So not bad, $1 million. I'm thinking, my goodness, I mean, I better be smelling pretty good if I get a shot of that, right? Like, how about that till you walk up to the perfume section, you're like at Nordstrom's and you're like, Yeah, I'd like to try on some of that Golden Delicious. You know. No, I don't want none of that Chanel number 5. No, I want some of that Golden Delicious. Hit me up, right? Like, they don't even offer sample. Like, are they really going to offer a sample? It's $1 million bottle, right? Like, one pump is like $100,000. You're like, yo, I better be smelling good here. Man. So how do they even let you sample it? I mean, you want me to trust you. You want me to pay you $1 million for this stuff, and you won't give me a sample because a sample costs $100,000 just to spray it. Well, how are we going to work this out? But it gets worse, right? I mean, you've got number 1, Imperial, right? I mean, you got all these silly names. Like the Majesté Imperial, right? By Clive Christian. I probably butchered that. You can get a bottle of that, though. I mean, look, you can really cut back. You can go small on that, $215,000, right? So you can be a good steward, right? You know, why spend $1 million? You could spend $215,000. You can be a good steward unto the Lord, right? Or here, I'll butcher this. Baccarat perfume by Les Hermes, or Les Hermes. Did I say that right? Baccarat? Look, you have a bottle of that stuff. Come on now, Liz. What's up with that, right? Poor Rafi, you're going to be working the rest of your life. You know, she did you wrong. She got a bottle. All right, well, is it Baccarat? Or a Baccarat? Baccarat? What do we got here? Oh, man, I really butchered it. Okay. How do you pronounce it? Butcher-a? Butcher it? Butcher it. Yeah, I butchered it. Okay. For an ounce of butcher it, it's $1,700. Oh, no, a quarter ounce, $1,700. $6,800 for 1 ounce, or for 11 and a half ounces, $78,200. Well, anyway, let me just butcher one more name while we're at it. That's it. Shumuk by Nabil. There you go. Here's a picture of that. For $1.5 million, you can have your very own Shumuk by Nabil. Now, imagine going to the store and you're there at Neiman Marcus and you're like, yeah, I'll take a thing of Shumuk. And you take $1.5 million, you write the check, you leave, and then you head over to Simon the leper's house with your Shumuk, and you're like, oh man, it's Jesus. And there it goes. Every last ounce, all for Jesus, because she treasured Jesus above all else.